How we doing?
Doing great. Welcome, Clark. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Kim. Let's get this going.
All right.
This will be fun. Let people trickle in.
All right. One of our favorite topics, cold outreach and getting that client meeting.
Yes, it's I think so we hear it all day every day, right? From people we work with, people we coach, stuff that we had to do, right? When we're running full sales desks. So it seems to be the hot button topic, especially in a kind of a roller coaster market, depending maybe on your industry, the market, the skill sets that you're recruiting. I feel like everyone since the beginning of time has had sales related questions, right? How do I get better clients? How to
Yes,
get better meetings? How do I run some of those better meetings? We recorded a podcast, about a month ago?
that's
We
right.
just kind of kept talking about it. So we're like, why don't we just do a little, dive a little bit deeper into this
That's right.
topic and kind of share what we see, what's working from an approach side of things and everything else. So this will be fun.
Yeah, let's dissect it and try to see if we can give some actionable techniques today that people can take back with them to their desk and get better results.
Absolutely. Yeah, if we're diving diving into it here,
All
we're going to
right.
be covering intentional prospecting, leveraging LinkedIn. Now everything that we're going to talk about and teach you, we're going to give you scenarios to think about, questions to from both your digital outreach to handling your inbox to running the meeting and things to kind of consider. You can LinkedIn is the way I love to do it. Kim does a lot of LinkedIn. Us us two have done a lot on email and calls as well. All the strategies from in terms of an outreach you can use on any type of media, but we just figured we'd focus on LinkedIn today. And that should be the foundation for business development for the majority of agency recruiters and producers. Um, we'll talk about booking meetings. It's not going to be something we spend a ton of time on, but there's a couple key things that I put in here that have transformed the way digital recruiter clients at least book their meetings from LinkedIn. Just little logistical things, actionable items you can use today. And then Kim's really going to deep dive into running the meeting, from preparing, being in the meeting, and what to do after. So
Yeah,
this will be good.
maximize our time there, right? We work so hard to get the meeting, and once we get there, let's get everything out of it that we possibly can.
Yeah, and I hear it a lot. Right? It's from LinkedIn, from building out everything we're going to talk about to the meeting. I think a lot of people I've talked to don't realize how much they're missing, how much meat they're leaving on the bone
Mhm.
from their meeting, and that it's actually one of the things I always get hear from digital recruiter clients is like are qualifying like a job order or running discovery meetings. Like I've never run a better meeting in my life, and so we're going to be leveraging your framework on this one. And that's why I think we both agree, because you do this day in and day out. Where I'm like, here's how to run the great meeting, but it's just that little piece. It's like it's the right question. So
Exactly.
I'm excited to dive in.
All
All right.
right.
The classic cold outreach. I think we see this all the time. No ICP. What is an ICP? Ideal client profile. So are you targeting HR at construction companies or superintendents, or are you looking to make accounting and finance placements? Right. So are you targeting CFOs, accounting managers, whatever that looks like. Being really clear on what that looks like. A lot of spray and pray. I mean, how many cold emails have you gotten today, Kim? Alone?
Oh, me?
Yeah,
I
dozens,
actually
hundreds.
probably about 12 so far
12
today.
already. Probably a few on LinkedIn, right? Scale your business, do all that, learn how to make video, AI videos that are going to, all that stuff, right? We get all the time. I get text messages now as well. Um, a lot of it, we all experience it. Why are you reaching out to me? Right. And so you want to avoid being the spray and pray person in outreach. It's just a waste of time. Uh, the third thing I hear all the time, Kim, I'm sure you do too. How'd the meeting run? What'd you talk about? How'd it go? Well, I talked about what I could do for the first 10 minutes. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and typically, that's probably a failed strategy because the things that you talked about that are important to you, your customer may care less about, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like you go to the car dealership and you just want a V8 engine, and they keep showing you, a bunch of cars that are green in color, and you don't care, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know at this point that your pitch is even going to be useful or valid to them because we don't know what their challenges or what their pain points are. So you're right there.
And to your point, just kind of a lack of strategy. So we're going to go in to avoid just pitching yourself only, and kind of when to pitch your services and how, and when to go about that. So we're going to cover that. And then some of the classic outreach, eventually ghosted. Oh, they didn't get back to me. I thought we had a great meeting, or I sent candidates over. And we'll kind of talk about some of the stuff that to prevent a lot of that happening. And especially what Kim's going to talk about is really going to help you prevent that and really start to build a strong foundation from the beginning. Because as anyone experienced in agency recruiting knows, those big clients, those great placements, they typically happen from an amazing first interaction and first meeting. So it's important to get it right.
Yeah. Hey, Clark, I do love how you mentioned no ideal customer profile. Let's face it, if everybody is on your target list, then it's not a target list, right? A target
Yeah.
list is a defined business plan that's finite, right? So, to your point, picking customers or prospects that align to your capabilities, your skill sets, your geography, all those things are key. Because if you're so scattered and everybody's a target, then nobody's a target, really.
Exactly.
You won't be
And you don't stand out, right? And we
Yeah.
kind of get into that, right? The new way, having a clear ICP, it lets people know how they can work with you, what problems you can solve for them. It lets them believe that you could solve those problems, because if you're one person, there's no way you can do everything under the sun well, right? And then you're really competing with every agency out there versus maybe competing with a couple,
Right.
right? And so the new way, leveraging the digital tools, is being intentional, being curious, right? Building long-term partnerships. You can do outreach at volume. So if you do intentional outreach at volume to give you more time for the human interaction and asking the right questions and getting curious, those are the recruiters, the agencies that we're working with that are seeing the profitability skyrocket. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the approach, and that's what we're gonna share today.
Being a specialist, not a generalist, right?
Exactly. They get paid more.
Yeah.
So we'll start with LinkedIn cold outreach. Did I skip a slide? No. All right, cool. Number one, doing your homework. If you're like me growing up, I hated doing my homework. I would do it last minute, or I would do it after it was due. But it is one of the most important parts, the first most important part, in terms of who you're targeting, doing your homework on companies, on leads, on the industry, right? Do you know why they're your ICP? Do you know how you can solve their problems, right? What do you know about the market or the industry is going to be so important in having any successful outreach, because your prospects are going to, and hiring managers are going to get hit up all the time. And it's not that they don't have a hiring problem to solve, but you got to be able to stand out from the noise. And to do that, you have to know the market. You have to do your research.
Yeah. Hey, Clark, you're right. If you get on the phone with them and you haven't done your homework, you haven't done your research, how are you going to know how to tailor that call or customize that conversation to something they care about? Absent of that, you're flying blind and you're just throwing a bunch of things out there. And again, they may not care about that. You haven't caught their attention in that first 15 seconds. So yeah, the research is key to figure out what they do, what their potential challenges are.
Yes. And a lot of people are like, oh, you don't believe in cold calls. Cold calls are fine. I have no problem with them. Cold emails are fine. I care about the result. And telling a recruiter, hey, make 300 calls today and giving them a phone, and that's it. The issue isn't that they're making cold calls. The issue is that there's no plan. There's no homework. There's no ICP. There's no purpose. And so that's what you were trying to avoid here. And that's what you always want to be trying to avoid, is do that first. And then whatever medium you use and all that can start to make more sense. But if you're just going blind, like it doesn't really matter what you do. You're not going to have success.
Yeah. It's not going to resonate. There's you haven't differentiated yourself whatsoever to know you understand their pain points or their industry.
Exactly. So why would they work with you, whether it's a cold call, cold email, or cold outreach on LinkedIn? So talk about LinkedIn. The LinkedIn profile, I should say LinkedIn profile, is having this optimized to your vertical, your niche, and it could be a couple different ones, but really leveraging the about section, the headline, the featured section, showing the problem you solve, why you solve it, right? Making things make sense to your hiring manager. So you're not just another agency recruiter hitting them up. Hey, what roles can you work on? I can fill anything, right? But just being like, you've owned that. And we've seen connection rates go up by 30, sometimes 40, 50% by just fixing LinkedIn profile. I had a client start in May who'd been doing this for 15 years, selling industrial automation, but he never really highlighted it on his profile. Fixed that up, and within a week, I think it was 9 days, he had an inbound client and is working on, has like a 6-figure pipeline with them already. It was inbound. He's like, I've never got an inbound client in my life. He's like, I can't believe I didn't change my profile years ago. Like, how much have I lost out on potentially by not making the changes? And this is a veteran, successful recruiter, right? That was, again, used to hitting the phones all day, every day, but he wanted to incorporate a digital approach. That's how effective it is, because his market, that manager knew how to buy from him, right? That he stood out in industrial automation and sales. That's pretty specific, and that's exactly what she needed. And he's working on like a super high level role for them. I think it's like a $70K fee. It's like all he did is change the profile.
Yeah.
Right. And then you control the narrative versus clients almost always having, it seems like they're at the front foot on you. So, go ahead.
Yeah. No, Clark, it's, I would challenge everybody on the call, have you looked at someone's LinkedIn profile out there and you're like, you've read it and you're like, wow, I can't tell what in the world it is they actually do. And that's where I think a lot of people, fall down. It should be crystal clear what it is that you do and the value you can provide from the profile. I think, to your point, Clark, keeping it simple is so key. The average attention span being what they say, like 8.5 seconds now. You just got to be crystal clear and quick and on it, where someone looks at it and goes, I get exactly what they do.
And just because it's clear to you doesn't mean it's clear to them, right? So asking for feedback, asking other people to audit and look at your stuff, because you're absolutely correct. Like, you have to be, it's always going to make more sense to us typically than it does. But if it doesn't make sense to us, it's really not going to make sense to your market, right? And so, and again, and these things can evolve and they can adapt, and that's kind of another conversation. But if you're kind of just saying like, well, what should I start with, right? Kind of looking at like, where are your wins? Where have you already been successful? And kind of go from there. All right, prospecting. One of my favorite things to do, my favorite things to teach. I love LinkedIn. I love Sales Navigator. Again, finding out the relevant titles, utilizing lead and account lists on Sales Navigator. Find the companies that are ones that you want to target and learn more intel, right? Build an account list, pull the leads and the hiring managers from those account lists. Leverage connection requests and sequencing. You can use automation tools, cloud-based, that are great to kind of have that flywheel going. So you have that volume on LinkedIn. You're connecting with your target market every single day. They're seeing your profile and that you're relevant to them, right? Mm-hmm. Your connection requests are going to go up. Your reply rates are going to go up. And then when you're prospecting, dig, right? I was on a one-on-one call with a client yesterday. We did a couple little filters on Sales Navigator. I found 3 companies that are perfectly in her niche that she was kind of scared to hone in on. She's like, what if I get siloed? She's like, wait, these are 3 amazing companies. And we looked at their job postings, their website, their leadership team. And she's like, this is a great target. This is my ideal client. And we did it all within 3 to 5 minutes, right? Just from that little bit of digging and just getting curious, knowing that you might not know every company. You don't know every company that's out there. So just kind of ways to think about that prospecting from the beginning. That's really going to help you, especially when you get to that meeting stage.
Yeah. And Clark, when you mentioned, the keep digging, I know a lot of people, especially maybe if they're early on in their staffing career, are always like, really tentative or don't want to necessarily reach out to like the senior level exec leadership, right? Like VPs or CIO or CFO. They tend to start out at the manager level. And my thought is, flip the script on that, do it all, right? Because sometimes if you start at the C or VP level, they're not getting hammered so frequently with calls and emails. Maybe they will meet with you. Maybe they will take your call. And those are the type of individuals that have that big picture view of the organization. Sometimes the hiring manager, they may be getting beat up consistently by other staffing recruiting suppliers, and they may not take your call. So what I say is, don't don't put yourself in a box. Start at the top of the chain and move down with prospecting, and also start at the bottom and move up. There is no one way to do it. I'd say try both when you're digging.
Such a great point. So happy you said that. That people are just people.
Yeah.
There's some people are jerks, like that's fine. But there's a lot of people that are really cool and really nice and really high level positions, and they need help hiring too because
Yeah.
they're focused on different things. So yeah, you don't have to be scared. And if you want to build up, and target people that might be a little bit lower on the org chart and talk to them and learn intel. Like lean into where you're actually going to be doing something. Like that's the key. Like what's going to get you to take action and build up that confidence, right? If you're newer, need to build it up, that's great. If you're a little bit more experienced, but like maybe haven't gone for that next level title, like go for it. What's the worst that can happen?
The worst that happens is, you either get a no, or they don't take your call or return your email, or whatever the case may be. You've lost nothing. So again, trying all things. So I love how you put in there, keep digging, and don't let your fears limit you. Try all the titles that are relative and pertinent.
And we're talking about people that are replying and are engaging today. But again, one of the ways to stay top of mind, I talk about this all the time, like LinkedIn content, right? You connect with them, and a way that you post is a way to kind of stay top of mind. It's a sales touch point. And I've had people book calls with me or sign up after 3 years of responding to nothing that I sent. And then all of a sudden they're like, they want to talk, and they sign up the next day.
Yeah, they call those the lurkers, right? The people that may read the content but don't, ever engage until they reach out and they actually need to. But to your point, Clark, you know what? It's free, right? It's a tool in our toolkit, in our tool belt. And so, putting content out there that can educate and inform and that's tailored toward that particular audience, it's only going to go and make your outreach all that much easier as people start to kind of, maybe recognize who you are within the recruiting space.
Exactly. Well said. And one thing I want to add, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We're going to get the questions once we go through the slides and presentation that we have here. So if you have any questions for myself or Kim, please throw them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end.
Great.
Next, messaging. Right? This is one of the biggest things in terms of at least digital, anywhere, email, LinkedIn. One of the things that people miss is like highlighting what they care about, right? Do they care about your firm and that you've done this and all that? Maybe, but put that on your LinkedIn profile. In the messaging, you want to keep it short. You want to keep it concise. You want to be curious. Open-ended questions are a potential gold mine, right? And not everyone is going to respond or answer or maybe have an amazing answer, but for every 10, 100 messages you send, you're going to get a few people that are like, oh, hiring is terrible, or we're struggling with this, right? But if you're engaging with them in terms of a business conversation, it's just a transactional conversation, right? And the way you do that is to figure out like what they care about. This is what I teach recruiters for the sourcing side with candidates is find, typically people just be like, oh, the company is this, and that. I'm like, no one cares. What they care is this role will do this, and this for you. Is that something that's interesting, right? And so like that's how you have to also think about business development. And it takes some work and it takes some trial and error. But if you test that out, if you're curious and you stop trying to close a deal on your first message, right? You get comfortable figuring out the inbox. Stop trying to predict and be perfect. You just embrace the business development process, right? That's where great messaging is born from interactions.
Hey, Clark, I love how you laid this slide out. I mean, again, because that outreach, it's about customization and tailoring it to again what they care about, and you figure that out through your research online, right? You can get a pretty good idea of things that are impacting their industry and skill sets that they need that they're struggling to get, and then also trying to create or show, understanding what their problem is, but showing them, hey, here's the outcome that we can potentially provide for you. Here's, potentially the result that we can get for you that we've gotten for other clients in a similar situation. And again, we won't have that completely nailed out on our very first interaction, but I try to create, in a way, plant the seeds for the future state of what we can do to solve that problem.
Right. And it's always time and money, right? It is, can you get the right candidate without wasting my time earlier? And is getting that candidate paying the placement fee going to be a value add to my business, right? Salespeople is always the easiest to quantify, right? If you have a new territory, you get a great salesperson in there. Well, they can make the placement fee back 10, 20, 100x ROI, right? At times, right? And it's kind of selling that and getting crafty on, like, do you say all that in the inbox, in the direct message? Can you have some of that on your profile, some of that on your content, right? There's different ways. And there's messaging. I didn't put this on the slide, but there's messaging that's great for content, and there's messaging that's great for a direct message. And kind of really understanding the difference. Sometimes you just kind of have to figure that out, but that's kind of one way that's helpful for me to think about it. Like, should this be a post or should this be a direct message? Let's keep going here. So LinkedIn replies, I would say, engage in the conversation. You don't need to set a meeting right away. And one of the mental reframes that I know I teach, and I'm sure you do too, is like, you have no idea if they're a great client or not from your initial cold outreach. The goal is to figure out if they're going to be a great client, and you're going to talk about that in the meeting and running the meeting. But take that pressure off of, like, every reply actually has to be a client, because I think we've all learned. I've learned. I'm sure you learned in the beginning of your career. You got a client, you got a bunch of roles, and nothing happened. Right? Because we didn't set it up correctly. So it's like, you don't need to set a meeting. You don't need to sign a client right away. Qualify in the inbox, right? Make a meeting make sense for yourself, but also for them, right? And so if you to ask some of these questions that Kim's going to talk about, and getting really embracing the inbox, and it's okay. And I know some of you might have metrics that you have to hit. You're like, Clark, I got to get my meetings. I'm like, I get that. That's why you have to have some little volume too, but you're going to get great meetings if you embrace the inbox and the conversation first.
Yeah, you're right. We're not going to be, every prospect's not going to be a fit for us, and we're not going to be a fit for them based on, a myriad of factors, right? Geography, skills, industry, whatever that is. But to your point, we've got to start to engage and ask the questions. And then I think sometimes too, in staffing, we get this thing, Clark, where we're like, well, let's just get the job order and we'll figure it out later, right? We'll figure out how to deliver on it. And then sometimes we never figure it out. Our team never figures it out. And we end up making a bad impression on this particular prospect. So I think that if they're not a fit, and we start to determine that in these initial conversations, telling them that they're, hey, I can't help you. I can't service you. It's really not what we do, but try X, Y, Z. They're going to have so much more respect for us.
Yes.
To that standpoint, the fact we were honest and we didn't waste their time. And who knows, when the timing is right, they'll probably come back around to us again because we handled them so respectfully.
They'll come back around with a much better approach. There's going to be so much less friction. Yeah. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is how can we reduce friction with marketing as much as possible, or good outreach as much as possible, right? Because there is only so much time in the day, and it's easy to overpromise and waste a bunch of time, to your point, on stuff that was never really going to close in the first place, if we'd just been honest with ourselves about it.
Exactly. Yeah, we kid ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. One of the things with LinkedIn replies, and this is one of in terms of the booking the actual meeting, I see on LinkedIn a lot of times, is the wrong way to respond could be, sure, let's talk. Great, let me know some times that work for you. Or here's a link to my calendar. Feel free to find a time that works for you. Now, that last one, there's a caveat there. Depending on where you're at in your sales business, if you have a lot going on, you could do that link, but that you have to be really rocking and rolling and have a huge pipeline to really kind of be able to leverage that piece. But the first two is what I see all the time. And it's a surefire way for a potential meeting to not even happen, right? You can't even get to the stuff that Kim's going to be talking about because the meeting doesn't happen. So one of the quickest things, this is one of the huge realizations I learned 4 years ago working for a LinkedIn outreach agency where, managing 15, 20 clients at a time, was people appreciate directness and the ability to pick 2 or 3 times, right? Reduce the amount of work the prospect has to do. Give people too many options or give them too much work, and they'll simply won't reply.
Yeah. And Clark, one thing I'd like to add to that, I love where you're going with this. There's I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Sandler sales methodology, but I learned years ago, they call it the upfront contract. And, when the wheels fall off right here, it's because, they could go dark because they're not necessarily bought into the meeting. But if you can actually lay out, hey, here's the purpose of the meeting. Here are my objectives in the meeting. I want to understand from you, Mr. Prospect, what would you like to get out of the meeting? What would you like me to cover and be prepared for? And then set the time, and then finally, hey, together we'll determine what our next steps are.
Okay.
So really kind of, again, laying out some type of a framework or agenda where they get to kind of have their day in court and tell us, hey, here's what I want to get out of the meeting. I want you to come prepared to talk, Clark, about, your qualification process and the benefits you give your contractors, whatever that may be. So again, I think if you can lay out a nice agenda where they know exactly what's going to happen in that meeting and how long it's going to take, and then you're going to cover what they want to hear, the chances of them canceling on you are going to be greatly minimized.
It's a great point. There's different ways you could automate some of that. Calendly, for example, has like different routing workflows or automations that you could send ahead of time to prepare your prospects and clients. You can do this stuff manually as well. And it's huge. Yeah, it reduces the cancellations and the no-shows. And this also increases like the goodwill in the actual meeting. So to go in to kind of with the right way to respond has been always, what we found works super well to book these meetings. Give them a specific time. It could be 11:30 Tuesday or Thursday, or how does 11:30, 12:30, or 1 Thursday look, right? Just kind of, you could do a little bit of a mix and match there. And people typically just, this time works, 11:30 Tuesday is perfect. It's like, let me know, is this the best email? I'll send the invite, right? Take the work off their hands, much like an interview, right? Setting up interview logistics or anything like that when you have a candidate, right? You want to control as much of the process as possible. So the little things aren't what trip you up.
Yes. Don't make them work for it, right? Because they may not.
Exactly. And then that's it. So, cool. And so what if they aren't clearly open to a call, but they're a great prospect? This potentially even could have gone earlier. Like the personalized second message is kind of what I was getting at. Like, don't worry about necessarily a super personalized first message, but if they reply, you can look at their profile, you can look at what they've done, their posts, you can like some posts, that you can check out their comments, right? And then really kind of cater, like, if there's something that you guys have in common, whether it's a hobby or anything else, or a business, if you worked at the same place, or went to college at the same place, right? Look for potential open roles they have. Get curious. I'd like to learn more about how'd the hiring for the RNs go. I saw that was open for like 4 weeks, or what's the strategy been like there, or I saw that you guys like had this new initiative, right? Or what's the game plan for the rest of the year, right? Just engage in a conversation without really expecting an outcome, and kind of just see if they can open up. And they might not be ready for a call right now, but you leave it on a good note. You wish them the best or whatever. Hey, reach out if I can ever be of assistance. And they're going to hopefully keep seeing your content, so it gives them more reasons to hopefully follow up down the road.
Exactly. Love it.
Cool. Booking meetings. I'm handing it off to you.
Okay. All right. So look at it this way. So, Clark did all the heavy lifting, right? How do we find these prospects and how do we engage them to where they want to commit to a meeting? And now this is probably what I call one of the most important things in what we do in staffing and recruiting. And it can also be the most fun. We get to be in front of customers and learn about their business. It's kind of the really enjoyable piece of what we do. But I think I've witnessed over the years, Clark, and I don't know if you'd agree with this, but this is where opportunity gets squandered. And yes. What I mean by that, it's like, so few account managers will actually do the research, do their homework, go in prepared, and engaged, and be able to ask all those thoughtful questions, beyond just chasing a job order. I mean, do you find that this is where people really, they don't do everything they should, and they may not crash and burn, but they still go out there and they don't maximize and get everything they could out of that interaction?
Yeah, I see it all the time. And look, when you're starting out, it's kind of to be expected, right? You can prepare, but you don't have the reps yet, so it's okay. Just knowing that, get the reps in, know that you're going to mess up meetings. You're not going to be perfect, but just get there. But one of the keys for me starting out at Aerotech was I just went on meetings with other managers and the ones that were experienced. I got to learn from them and got to see kind of what they did, right? So I could understand, to the side points, like, okay, I got to just own my experience. I can't lie about anything. I got to show, we're talking about whatever results I have. Bring in candidate resumes that could be relevant to them, right? Where your homework, like just as a talking point, not, hey, I'm going to place this candidate, but just giving reasons to kind of generate that conversations. Like that's when I started to really learn, okay, I can have more effective meetings, but it might not happen in the beginning. But as you get to a certain level, it's just like you can always get better. You can always self-scout, right? Evaluate yourself after a meeting, but prep the best way you can, and just know that like it'll get better and better and easier the more you do it.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to preps, here are some things that really helped me and people on my team over the years. First of all, do we even have do we have a history with this particular client? Because what I found is oftentimes a contract can get signed, maybe 5 years ago, placements were made, then the account goes dormant and we forget about it. So, check your CRM. I've been pleasantly surprised sometimes that there's already an agreement on file or there was in the past, and kind of understand what those terms were. Then what I would also do, going back to what you said, Clark, this is where the heavy duty research comes in. Spend the time to look at their industry. What's the regulation or compliance or legislation that's impacting them right now? So you can speak intelligently to it, right?
Yep.
What are the trends that are hitting their industry? And then knowing how other companies that are similar to them, how they're adapting to that, and your ability to help with this. So think of it this way, guys, as an example, like healthcare, they have tons of regulations, or, DOD, federal integrators, a lot of regulation that they have as well. Understanding this and understanding the challenges that go along with this, and being able to craft a solution in terms of how you can help with this is going to be strong, right? Because it's what they care about. It's tailoring it and customizing it. Also, too, I'd say, have a recruiter come with you if it makes sense. Sometimes recruiters, if you're working a 180 model, they may have questions and experiences that you don't have. So always evaluate that. I found a recruiter on a client meeting used in the proper dosages can be, very, very helpful and useful.
I loved it. By the way, I love doing that because eventually for some accounts, I wanted to be able to hand it off to them as the account manager, right? So I could go out and get new business. So I'm with you. If you can get a recruiter involved from the start that you can trust and is good facing, with facing clients, it's invaluable.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we can learn a lot. They have a different viewpoint. So here we are, we're sitting down in front of the hiring manager. And I want to frame these slides and frame your thoughts one way. Look at this in the standpoint of, instead of just chasing one job order, which I know we have to keep our jobs, we're trying to find out the entire opportunity, the entire size of the pie, so we can go out and gain client share, right? It's all about client share. If we place 5 people a year at a particular customer, and then we find out our competition is placing 255 people a year, who's more relevant, who's more significant, and who's going to maintain their spot, working with that client? It's going to be your competitor. So here's some of the things that we can ask. What's the budget for the department, right? We want to understand what we're dealing with. Is it a $100,000 a year budget, or is this a pretty big department? Key question: what is your staffing spend, both permanent and contract, for agencies? We want to understand the whole piece of the pie, right? Then we want to find out what's your staffing spend for this particular department, right? We want to understand what's the team structure. How does this particular team fit into the large, picture of this company, especially if it's a larger organization? What do they do? How do they tie into the big picture? What do they contribute, right? What are the responsibilities of this team? Okay. So again, understanding total spend, perm and contract, and then total spend for that particular department. Because again, it could, your efforts could be like, wow, their department spend for contractor perm hires is next to nothing. It may cause you to pivot to another direction. So all questions we want to ask. Thoughts on that, Clark?
What if someone doesn't know the answer?
Okay, that's a great question. What I have found is sometimes people will know the answer. Oftentimes they will if you ask. Sometimes they don't. So when they don't know that, I typically ask them, gosh, is there a way that you could find that information out? And sometimes the answer to that could be, again, yes or no. But if the answer is no, what I tend to do is ask that question of every single person I meet. Number one, to get the info. Number two, to corroborate the story, right? And I think you'll find as well, the higher up you go on the chain, director, VP, or C-level, they will have answers to those questions. Sometimes where you get maybe a wishy-washy or I don't know answer could be down at that managerial level. But again, always ask it. You're going to probably be pleasantly surprised at how often somebody's going to have that info, or at least an estimate, right? And that estimate can help guide you understand, whoa, this is a big opportunity here. Maybe not.
Yeah, and I think the different ways, it could be, well, how many contractors you have. I mean, if they don't know their spend, it could be a number of contractors that they think they have in the organization, right? And different titles might know the total number of contractors versus the spend. But what are some ways? How do you guess frame it? So asking the staffing question seems like a question that it's helpful not just for you to know as the agency recruiter, but also makes sense for them to share it with you.
Yeah, no, I understand. It has to be framed in terms of what's in it for them, right?
Yeah.
Just say, hey, is a new staffing supply partner to you. We're not doing our job if we're only giving you people for the PMO, and you need to hire application development, network and infrastructure, database admin people. We're not doing our jobs, and therefore, when you go to scorecard us and evaluate us and give us feedback, we want it to be positive. But if we're not servicing you and filling every open need that you have, that's slated for agency hire, we're not doing our job. So again, kind of what's in it for them. And Clark, you hit on something. You might have read ahead, and I love it. We need to know too total number of contractors in the organization and total number of contractors on the team versus the FTEs. Because, there you go. Very important, because once again, we compare ourselves to ourselves, think we're doing a great job with 15 contractors on assignment. Then we ask that question and find out that our competition's got 85 contractors on assignment, right? I've lived in that. I've seen people that happen to people on my team. It's happened to me in the past. I thought, wow, I'm never going to make that mistake again. So know the total number of contract and perm agency hires that you could have the opportunity to fill that are within your functional area by asking the question. We always want to, I'm sorry, jump in.
No, I couldn't agree more. I saw the stuff with the skill sets and certifications, and I just kept thinking back to my staffing, the Aerotech staffing days of light industrial. I've never driven a forklift in my life, and I still haven't. But knowing the difference between a cherry picker and the stand up and the sit down and how to screen those questions, even just doing a little bit of that research and learning for the candidates made such a difference in how much more effective my meetings were, my credibility was with hiring managers.
Yeah.
So just like little things like that, then I see it. I'm like, yeah, that's what really helped me take the level up and the step up with my credibility with those hiring managers at that time.
Yeah. And a couple more, I think, deeper questions that we can ask is, do they have any peak periods or seasonal or cyclical periods, which is pretty darn common in finance and accounting. It's actually really common in healthcare, right? In certain areas of the country, have a surge, like, in the southern states in the wintertime, they need to go and hire more RNs. So it's always good to understand cyclical, seasonal, peak needs, because that's going to drive hiring and drive opportunity for us. I always like to ask, what are their top business initiatives or challenges, right? Maybe it could be there's a new software release this year. It's a top initiative, and it could be a big challenge for them. So again, we're chasing after, those big questions versus just like, do you have an open job order, right? Because as something like that, you're going to maybe determine or learn that there's something overarching happening in the organization that's going to really impact them, which in turn can really impact hiring and help you and them out.
It's always trying to find out the urgency. I mean, all of this stuff, we're trying to find out urgency, because I think anyone that's tried contingent recruiting has realized, oh, I had a role, I thought it was going to close, and what happens? Oh, they put it on hold, or they don't have the budget, or they went internal. It's like, what's the urgency to work with us? Because if you're going to a third-party recruiter, it means you've exhausted your internal options, right? So you're always trying to find out urgency, and these questions, that's what it's going to uncover, the opportunities to find, hopefully an urgent client, department, hiring manager, right? And it's going to make sense as to why they need you right now and why this deal is going to close.
Yeah, you're right. The person you're talking to may not be connected to this large business initiative, but maybe their peer is, to your point, Clark, over here, and you need to go meet that person. Or maybe it's something that's going to happen 6 months from now, right? Yep. And you need to get prepared for it. Maybe start pipelining or setting yourself up to help them.
I love that you said that 6 months from now, because a lot of people on LinkedIn, it's like, I have to have it yesterday. Oh, they're not hiring until Q3, Q4. Okay, so what?
Exactly.
Set yourself up for Q3, Q4. Like, excuse my French, but stop bitching. Add it to your target accounts, follow up, set some meetings, and get ready to win that business in Q3, Q4. Like, do you want to make money or not? Right? And it's like, it's all good. Like, I think sometimes there needs to be some humility in terms of this is business development. Like, you get some stuff now, great. Also plan for some stuff in the future, right? And that's how you get some great clients. So I just kind of had to add that piece because I hear it too often.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's a mindset that we have to have, that it could take us a year or longer to actually have this particular prospect have a need and want to engage us. And that's okay. If there's no pain, there's no challenges, there's no needs, that's okay. They're not going to buy from us, right? We have to go, and it's up to us to keep in touch and continually add value until they have that need. You and I have lived it, right? You're going, gosh, I'm never going to work with this prospect. And the next thing you know, 6, 9, 12, 18 months later, they have a need and they remember you because you stuck around and you stayed in touch.
Exactly.
Great. A couple more questions that we can ask, again, digging in a little bit deeper versus chasing the job board. What are the upcoming projects that they have? What are they trying to improve upon, right? Is there anything that they put on hold over the past year? I saw a lot of that in 2023 when we were really in a tentative environment. So they put anything on hold, and are they potentially going to move forward with it this year or within the next 6 or 9 months? Are they having like strategic changes in their businesses? Are they going to do a restructuring, a reduction, a divestiture, a merger or an acquisition? All these things have massive impact, right? And they drive hiring. We're looking for, I put in 2 categories: growth or trouble, right? And strategic changes could be growth, it could be trouble, but usually that translates into opportunity for us where they need to hire. Even in a reduction or a restructuring, they let full-time FTEs go. Oftentimes they'll bring in some contractors till the dust settles to kind of keep those functions, moving along smoothly. Because let's face it, Clark, you got to have basic functions. You got to have IT infrastructure in every business. You got to be able to make payroll. You have to have AP, AR. There's some functions that have to keep continuing, even if you let people go. And that's oftentimes where we can come in, but we wouldn't know that if we didn't ask that question, right?
Absolutely. And I think just everything you're talking about, you want to gather intel as matchmakers.
Yes.
Right? I mean, think about what's that show? Married at First Sight. And it's like the interviews they do with people, the incentive, the questionnaires, all the data they're gathering, and they still get it wrong because it's reality TV, and wouldn't be fun if everyone got it right? But all the work they do is to get intel to try to make the right match. It's the same thing as an agency recruiter, because you got to find the client and the candidate. You got to get all this intel, so then you can kind of bring it to your desk. But okay, what's the move? I now know all this. What's the best move for our firm with the best approach? How do I set up my week? When's the next meeting? How do I approach the next meeting? Like, everything has to be so much more calculated than you might first think, right? And you can only really make that if you have the right intel and you get the right kind of inputs from these conversations, from everything that you're covering here, Kim. So
exactly. One thing I really want to hit hard is verifying all their locations and departments, right? And this could be a huge entry point for you as a staffing provider, because just because they're able to fill their jobs in Tampa, Florida, doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to fill their jobs in Dallas, Texas, or Denver, Colorado, right? Geography can sometimes be a huge opening point for us. I've seen this specifically not only in IT, but also in healthcare. They may have RNs galore, in the state of Florida, but you maybe get to some of these other smaller towns or smaller cities, and they could just have gaping wounds there where they really need people. And that's our opportunity to come in and provide value there. So again, understanding all their locations and all departments that match our capability where we potentially could provide services to them. Right.
I love it. And this is an easy one to research ahead of time.
It is. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, because you're right. We can look online and figure that out and then walk into the meeting and say, hey, I know you have locations in city A, B, C, and D. Am I missing any other locations? How's hiring going there? And then start probing with questions related to that. Also, Clark, again, this is kind of standard, but I feel like so many people skip this question, and we need to understand it. What's the process for hiring contract and permanent? Is it working? Right? Process could be different for contract and perm handled by HR, or maybe the others handled by an MSP. Maybe the hiring manager can take it upon his or herself to do it, without HR involved. It could be any of a myriad of things, but we need to understand that, because that way we'll start to understand the buyers in the process, right? And who we need to reach out and get in touch with.
And you understand how you can be tactful with your interactions with them, right? And not overstep or not step on toes or annoy people. And like, you can learn to be just, again, tactful in your interaction with them. And like, hey, I don't want to step on toes here. I know you go MSP, like you might introducing me just so I can go through the right order of operations.
Exactly.
And then you can show that you're thoughtful about how you're approaching this.
I love it. Yeah, you're showing that you're respectful of their process. But also what I'm digging for here, and I know you would be too, Clark, it's, you're looking for the gaping wound, right? Oh gosh, our process usually is working with this MSP, and they're not getting me the right people. It's taken 3 months. Or, oh wow, we're using, job boards. And that's an easy one to sell against, because if anybody's ever tried to hire someone off of a job board, it's, for lack of a better word, it's just, it's kind of hell on earth, right? You've got hundreds and hundreds of resumes of people that may be, truck drivers or dog groomers and, applying to an IT job. So, whenever we struggle hiring off of a job board, they have that same struggle, and it takes a lot of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they don't typically have the time that even we do to reply to the job postings and the people and everything else. So,
yeah. And Clark, have you found too, I think that, our job is to be experts at hiring. I found that a lot of the clients that we work with, I mean, it's just my own personal anecdote, they tend not to like hiring, and quite honestly, they're not that good at it, right? It's not as a CFO, your core function is not necessarily, understanding the staffing industry. And so that's where we come in, because oftentimes they just don't know what they don't know, and it's up to us to educate and help them.
It starts there. Then their own experience has worked with an agency that, again, agency recruiting is a low barrier to entry. Anyone can really call themselves a recruiter. They tried a couple recruiters that didn't know what they were doing, or they overpromised on that. So they don't know how to hire. Then they think that they're going to the experts, and they didn't know what they were doing. So then it's just all a mess. So they don't know if they blame themselves. Do they blame recruiters? Is that how it all is? So it's just, all of this stuff is giving them a different experience. I'm like, no, there are actual experts that know what they're doing, and I'm one of them, right? And that's what you always want to demonstrate. And that's, I think, mentally the mindset you have to have at every stage. That's what you're going to be dealing against. That's the reputation, right? We had similar ones as coaches, right? Anyone can call themselves a coach, right? Well, do you actually know what you're doing? It's very similar, right? Imagine how, maybe if you're on here, if you vetted a coach, your clients are vetting you as an agency, hopefully the same way, right?
Yeah.
And so you just have to kind of keep that in mind and know what the landscape looks like. And that's why these questions can help you create so much leverage and guidance to kind of show you as hopefully the expert that you are.
Yeah. And Clark, you alluded to this a couple of minutes ago. We need to be respectful of the process, but what's in it for us is we need to understand all the buyers in the sale. So if we determine that HR or an MSP is involved, or internal recruiting, or whoever, we need to know, who are they, right? And we need to go and get in front of them so we can, check all the boxes of all the buyers. I call those the user buyers, right? Or the gatekeepers, HR, MSP. And, have they used staffing in the past? How did it go? I always love that question, because, sometimes I had a really negative, bad experience working with a staffing recruiting company, and I want to hear about that. Tell me what happened. I want to understand. Tell me more, right? That way they get to get it all out, and then we hopefully can understand what went wrong and explain to them how that's not going to happen working with us, right? Here's what we have in place so that doesn't happen. But it's always a question I want to know, because that's like gold right there.
This is one of those questions that helps you not get ghosted.
Yes. Yes.
What we alluded to in the beginning of the slides is this is the key, because a lot of times you could think you did great, but they're like, well, we kind of heard we had a great call with the last firm and it turned into crap. Why wouldn't this be any different? Versus if you actually ask that question, allow them to address that and vent. First of all, they feel way better than when they're venting after they vent about it. And they're like,
Yes.
oh man, that's terrible. Like, let me kind of break down to you, I think, why that happened. Right.
Yeah.
And like I see and hear this all the time. And here's how we actually do things a little bit differently to mitigate that. And now some of that might just be, I might just be saying nice words. So the only way to know is to actually deal with me. And I get it. If it's too painful and you don't want to, I totally understand. Right. But you have the ability to just say that and mitigate it if they share that experience. And it's like, oh, an agency and a recruiter that actually gets it. Like they understand kind of what we went through and they've actively taken steps to make sure that they're not like that.
Yeah,
right?
It shows you're listening to them as well. You're listening. You're not just, running over them with words and glossing over that. You're truly listening and offering up a thoughtful reply of how this won't, we won't repeat that bad scenario. The last two bullets, I'll lump those together, right? What are they looking for? What are those tough to fill roles? Because here's where I want to set the stage for that. I'm going to candidate market to them in the future. To me, Clark, there's no better value add than being able to candidate market, right? When I call you, Clark, as a prospect, I'm like, hey, Clark, it's Kim. How you doing? Over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, there's not much value in that, right? Besides me clogging up your voicemail or your email. But if I understand that you need an RN case manager that has X, Y, and Z, and that will go and travel to A, B, and C, then that way I can, when I find that profile, I can go and present it to you. Hey, I found a candidate that's going to be a perfect fit for your environment. Here's what they've done. Here's what they have. Here's how they translate into what you typically need. So candidate marketing is so strong, and it's a great way to add value. And I have to be honest with you, I've seen a lot of staffing companies get really sloppy on that and not do it just out of pure laziness. It's like if the candidate doesn't fit their exact job opening, then tough. Forget it, right? But really good recruiters, can realize that they have a candidate that's gold that they can place, and they get on the phone and they start candidate marketing them. But this is where it starts to understand what they would look for, and then managing expectations that we're going to candidate market, right? Hey, when I find these type of individuals, I'm going to reach out to you, and I'm only going to show you individuals that are head and shoulders above the rest that meet these criteria. And I've yet to have any prospect or client tell me, no, don't.
Exactly. And MPC, most placeable candidate, is a huge topic. And I've gone cold emails, 5 candidates, one big firm sends me 30 every week. I'm like, all right, it dilutes the value, right? Your best MPC is going to be with your top 20 accounts that you already know intel, and you've gone verbal confirmation of what they're already looking for, what their tough to fill roles are. That's your best MPC approach. Now, you can do it cold, and I've had it work for a lot of clients. I've had it work for myself. But it's going to increase your probability and effectiveness with your top 20 accounts. Like that's when the real MPC candidate marketing, you're just increasing your odds of being super effective.
Yeah. The place where I was, Clark, for many, many years, we, as a company, had gotten really sloppy or negligent on candidate marketing. And long story short, we enacted like a contest to get people back on that bandwagon again. And it was amazing how we watched our metrics. We watched our KPIs shoot up. It increased the number of client visits. It increased the number of job orders, and ultimately increased the number of interviews, right? And then it got conversations going. So big fan of candidate marketing, and that's probably an area not to be negligent on.
Exactly. It's the product.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, leading with the product.
Exactly. And this is where too on this slide, we're finding that pain and we're digging it in, right? And you find the pain, take the fork, start digging it in, right? So when you have an open role, what's the impact? Okay. What's the impact to you? What's the impact to your team? Right? What's the cost to you? You can't go live with a software release, or you're losing customers. So again, digging into the pain, right? Impact to you. Are people quitting? Are they working overtime? Have you not been home, any night before 8 p.m. this week? So role being open, impact to them, personal impact to them and the team, right? Because it's going to kind of solidify that pain that what they're doing right now isn't necessarily working, and maybe you can help. Of course, I mentioned before, guys, we do job orders are the way we keep the lights on. We do have to ask if they have open jobs. And we always have to kind of go through, to Clark's point, and point out the reasons why job boards and HR typically don't work. And we talked about that a moment ago, right? It's like finding a needle in a haystack, and there's big impact when a role is open. We also want to know the decision makers, right? Those buyers in the process. We mentioned the user buyer being like HR and MSP. And then we talked about, they're the technical buyer. I'm sorry. User buyer is typically the manager we're meeting with. We want to find, guys, that economic buyer too. That's the person that actually has the checkbook. They're the ones that have that final budget approval. Boom, there they are. So I would say, where I've watched a deal crumble and the wheels fall off in the 11th hour, it's where an account manager didn't dot their I's and cross their T's with all these buying influences, right? They didn't go to the HR person as a technical buyer and get the MSA signed, or they didn't meet with the VP, who's the economic buyer, who's the one who's solidifying the funds. And then finally, the coaches. These are the people that we love, right? They're the evangelists for our services. They help us navigate the organization. They make introductions for us. They give us referrals. They're truly vested in our success. And we want to try to develop as many coaches as possible. But I think the key takeaway on this slide is, make certain you understand all the people, decision makers involved in this process, from the people that are guarding the gate to the user, all the way to the person that's encumbering the funds.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then finally here, guys, another key area for pain points would be onboarding and retention. A lot of companies do a really poor job at onboarding and retention. And a lot of them do a poor job, staffing companies, at keeping contractors on assignment. Can be a pain point. Get contractors out there, they fly out the door. That's a great way to maybe unseat your competition. And finding out what could a staffing firm do better that they're currently not doing, right?
Yeah, it's all good things to ask. It's not maybe directly related to the current role, but having this intel, you can start to see how all the pieces kind of fit together in their whole hiring processes. And you can just be more targeted with your BD and your follow-up, and kind of knowing where else you can potentially create revenue opportunities for your firm.
Exactly. Contractors flying out the door doesn't help them, but it could help us.
Exactly.
Okay. Who else should we be speaking to, right? Always want to ask that, maximize, and then ask for an introduction. I always say, can you introduce me to John Doe? And what I found personally is, if I write the email for that person, they just take it and they forward it over, and that way I control the fact that it actually gets done versus it not getting done, right?
Yeah.
And then finally, that last bullet, what market data, what can we provide to you that would be value? What value add services do you need that we could provide? Could be anything, information, webinars, articles, data, could be anything, but we always want to hit that last bullet.
Compensation reports and all that, right, for different markets, everything else.
Exactly.
I love doing that. Back in the day with Career Builder, that was something I would actually bring to the meeting, or even ask, how could I create that for after the meeting? Huge value add, takes us 5 minutes to put together. And it's something that they haven't been exposed to before, and sometimes can answer their question as to why they weren't filling the role and been open for a year. And then you look like an absolute savior that knows all the answers.
Exactly. Perfect. Okay. All right. And then closing the meeting, I think we want to demonstrate how we can solve their business challenges and highlight our capabilities of how we're going to bring results and impact to the challenges and issues that they have. Going back to what we said at the very beginning of this one, when Clark was speaking. Set expectations for candidate marketing, and set that next meeting while you're sitting in front of them. Hey, you thought it'd be great that we follow up 3 months from now as you kick off your new project. Let's go ahead and put that on the calendar right now, so we don't have to do that, 3 months from now when you're really busy. Set that next meeting while you have the captive audience. And then finally, summarize and agree on the next steps together. That way you don't walk out of the meeting going, wait, what was I supposed to do? What were they supposed to do?
I love it. It was a ton. We just covered a ton in about an hour, 59 minutes. Again, our Kim's contact information, you can contact me if you want to kind of learn more. You're like, hey, this is super helpful. Let's kind of get more guidance on this. We both work with agency recruiters, staffing firms. Kim really helps with a lot of the sales process. I help with a lot of the digital piece, and on LinkedIn, especially as well, at creating that momentum, that marketing piece as well. And then, Kim, obviously just ran a masterclass on how to run these meetings and kind of really build your book out, business out, and your target accounts out, and have a great year. So.
Yeah. Oh, and I appreciate you inviting me and Clark. And I think the way to frame this for everyone that's watching today is, again, what are my takeaways from this? What are some things that I can do more of, do less of, or do a little bit differently that's going to go and drive results in my business?
Absolutely. Well, we have one question. We had a couple comments from John King. I saw him. I saw Luke. He mentioned about your talking to different levels of people and not being scared to just talk to entry, lower level to higher level type people. Bradley showed up. What's up, Bradley? Saul. Yes, this will be available later to watch again. We'll probably have this up on YouTube, Digital Recruiter channel. Kim, we'll make sure you can post it on your whatever socials you need to as well. But we'll just leave this up. You can access it on each of our LinkedIns as well if you go down and go to our events tab. But Melanie had a question. Can you share tips on how to get an actual reply from the right person when you are doing a cold outreach? What we kind of talked about earlier, just know your reply rate is going to be lower just in general. But getting a great reply, what we talked about, the NPC, Mark, look at the open roles, look at their title. Are they a VP of sales? How's their sales team? Right? Are they hitting quota? Are they on track? Are you looking to hire? Do they show on their Sales Navigator or LinkedIn or their website that they are hiring for more salespeople? Is there an article that's showing growth that they're looking to expand? Right? Like, be relevant to their current business challenges. And under that will be hiring. But that's the approach, right? How is hiring going for you in this market, right? In SaaS sales, there's a ton of candidates available right now. So they're probably not having that hard of a time finding candidates, but do they know how to qualify them? Do they know how to screen them, right? Those are the things that you start to think about. Are there different ways that I could impact? So you have a ton of candidates, but you don't know how to get the right one in the door, right? So maybe they're wasting time there. So think about the different business problems. Think about the landscape. If you have a targeted ICP, I've used, how are hiring efforts going? Are you looking for a role this year? Looking to add team members, right? Is your team, added quota, or what projects do you guys have coming up that you're excited about? Right? Engage in the conversation. And kind of, again, without knowing your niche and vertical, start to get too specific on what would work. But those are just some ways I would start thinking about it.
And I would tell everyone, subscribe to SHRM.org newsletter, SHRM.org newsletter. I'm telling you, daily they send out such great content that talks about challenges with the hiring landscape that I know all of our customers are dealing with. And I take a lot of those articles and I package them up and send them to my customers, with kind of like a commentary. But that's a great website to highlight issues, regulation, things that are happening, and get those to your customer to show how it's being handled. So it's been a helpful website, SHRM.org. Sign up for the newsletter.
I love that. And you have newsletters as well. I do as well. That stuff is free. I've done a bunch of these LinkedIn lives. Kim and I had a podcast, the Digital Recruiter podcast that we recorded. You can check that out. We kind of dive into other topics there as well. Be a sponge. I think it's the takeaway, right? Be a sponge, get the reps in. Don't expect to be perfect, and just keep at it. And you'll get there.
Long-term mindset. Don't give up. Long-term. It can take a year. It can take a year or more.
They really can. So, well, thank you, Melanie, for your question. Marissa, thank you for the kind words. You're quite welcome. This is super fun. And Kim, thank you for joining me and providing all your expertise and knowledge.
Feel free, everyone, to reach out to Clark and I if you have any additional questions and would like to talk. Love to meet you.
Sounds good. All right. That's all, folks.